A relationship with the right referral partner could be a game changer for any B2B company. So what if you could reverse engineer these relationships at a moment's notice? Start a podcast, invite potential referral partners to be guests on your show, and grow your referral network faster than ever. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
All right, everybody, welcome to the inaugural episode of #Prospecting, my series inside of the B2B Growth Show. I am Rex Biberston. I'll give you a little bit of my background to explain why James and the team at Sweetfish asked me to talk about prospecting as my core subject here and why I couldn't be more excited. So I started my sales career in door-to-door sales at the age of 16, eventually continued that later on in life after learning that that's what I wanted to do, not become an educator. And I went to work at InsideSales.com where I learned all about the science, the math, the process of sales. And I got to practice a lot of the art of sales as well. I eventually went on to write a book with a co-author, my current co-founder, Ryan Reisert. We talked about outbound sales, and we called the book Outbound Sales No Fluff. That went well enough. We ended up starting a company to help people implement the core concepts that we talked about. And ultimately, I also kicked off a podcast here hosted by the guys at Sweetfish that we talk about sales, talk about startup life, entrepreneurship. It's with Kevin Romani, the former head of Close.io, his sales team there. So I just want to give you a little bit of background to say, why the heck is this guy the one talking about prospecting? How could he have the audacity to tell me something about prospecting? I've spent my entire career in it. I couldn't be more excited about it. I love it. I especially focus on outbound sales, generating new opportunity where there was no opportunity, interest, or awareness before. So that's a little bit about me. I really want to dive quickly into the topic. And today I want to talk about follow-up. You would think, maybe for a first episode, I should talk about the very first thing we do in prospecting, which is figuring out our target market. I'd rather dive into something you're probably dealing with today. One of the things I see most commonly here in the sales world is the typical follow-up, right? There's just no good reason for it. We're just saying, oh, hey, look, you remember me? Hey, we talked before. Oh, hey, are you ghosting me? Hey, what's going on? Are we breaking up? All this other nonsense. And I just wanted to give 3 actionable concepts, 3 things you can do to improve your prospecting and improve your follow-up. So the first one here, I want you to think about whether or not you could propose a new idea to this prospect, right? So this actually comes from my most popular LinkedIn post of 2019 so far, and it was all about the follow-up. And this first idea, I call it the new idea strategy, right? So if I was sending an email to Susan, I'd say, hey, Susan, you asked me to reach out this month, and since we last spoke, I had an idea. What if instead of the traditional approach, right? I would insert the traditional approach. And then we insert some new approach, right? So what if instead of just sitting you down for a boring demo where I talk to you, we send you a quick 10-minute pitch. You understand if it's worth it for you, and you shoot me back a note at the time that works for you, right? That's a little bit different. We could go way different. If you're further in the sales cycle, your follow-up could be more like, look, instead of you deciding on that contract we sent you a month ago and haven't heard back on, what if we do this? I'll send you over a proposal for a pilot, or let's sit down to talk about a pilot, how that could benefit your business, what we could do in terms of price to make that easily justified for you and getting you an ROI, right? This is just a new idea. Give them some reason to think about you differently because you prove that you're thinking about them differently. It's really, really important when you're leveraging the new idea. Now, it has to actually be approved. So if you're not at a startup where you're the founder, you basically don't get to decide what the new idea is most often. And it could be difficult, but just think about them differently and what the benefit is to their company, to them personally, and do something just different. So that's the new idea strategy. Number 2 is the new useful content strategy, right? This is really important that it be useful. You can't just send some old article, some random piece of content. I had a conversation with someone the other day and I said, oh, you know what? I actually just read an article on that. They were talking about building an ROI calculator. I said, why don't I send you this article from Gong? These great folks, and they'd never even heard of Gong, so there's no way they would have read the article. I said, hey, I'll send you this article on this. And it's all about ROI and pitching ROI during a sales conversation. And that was literally the most useful content I could have provided at the moment, given the conversation we had. So this is the goal here, is to provide that very, very useful information. Now, the way you might leverage that in a pitch, right? So let's throw it into maybe an email or a conversation. So Tom, we connected in December about, then you'd insert the core problem you solve. I actually found a great, let's say, article, podcast episode, whatever, relating to what we discussed. Here's the link, or I'll send you the link. What would it take to get 15 minutes on your calendar to discuss how this could benefit your team at company name, right? So something along these lines where we're quickly dropping some knowledge. Hey, I was thinking about you. Hey, I saw this thing. It relates to what we talked about. It relates to what you're trying to accomplish. It relates to a pain you're experiencing that we believe we can help you solve. But here's some content, whether it's from us or not. It's always useful if it's third party because it means you weren't just trying to shove your brand down their throat. But I think this is really valuable, even if it is your own brand, because it's useful content. It should be helping them in some way. Now, if you don't know where to find content, if you're not immersed in things that can be benefiting your company, your prospects' companies, your clients' companies, you need to be understanding more of the content that's available. Now, your marketing team may be able to help you with this. Often they're looking at other content out there. They could share this with you. Maybe some of the best sales reps in your company, they're likely sharing content along the way. Certainly you can go on LinkedIn, follow influencers, people with things to say. But the most important thing is that it's relevant, useful content. Something that you can have a conversation around. Because if you're just following up, sending content and hoping that that sparks a conversation without some clear relationship between the content and the next step, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? So that's number 2. So number 1 is the new idea. Number 2 is the new useful content. And then finally, there's the new request. So this is pretty wild and out there, but it's really, really valuable. So when you think about what you can ask someone to do, there's a whole spectrum of things, right? There's, we call them call to action. So we could be calling someone to a certain kind of action. We could be asking them for a certain kind of thing. Most often in prospecting, we're asking for a meeting, right? That's the first step, okay? That's pretty difficult to do. When you look at on the far left side of our spectrum, we might have things that people are very unlikely to do. And on the far right-hand side of the spectrum, things that people are more likely to do. There's really no one who can master the art of things that people are very likely to do unless you're giving away free value and you happen to know that it's exactly a fit for them, which you couldn't know without a conversation. So really, we're looking from the left-hand side of the spectrum, which is they're just almost definitely not going to do it, to the far right-hand side of the spectrum where it's they're more likely to do it, right? So when we talk about the new request, this is probably because we're too far on the left-hand side of the spectrum where they're just very unlikely to do it. If you cold call, cold email someone and ask for their time, it's one of the most difficult things to get them to agree to do, right? Their time is extremely valuable. They have to believe that there would be something to come out of it. There would be some value they're getting. And that's not just learning about your product, because frankly, your marketing team's probably going to do a great job with that already. If not, your competitor's marketing team is. So when you look at the new request, here's what it sounds like. Hey, Abdul, we spoke a while back when I was calling to get time on your calendar to review this core problem we solve. But I've actually got a favor to ask you. Would you spend 15 minutes on our new podcast talking about whatever topic they're an expert in? I mean, imagine the difference in asking someone to have a sales conversation than in asking someone to have a conversation in a field they're an expert in, right? Now, this is pretty particular to podcasting, but the same could be true for an article on the website, on the blog. It could be true for just a quick video you wanted to share on YouTube or on your LinkedIn page. there's a lot of content that you could generate by talking to your ideal customers. Certainly, I know that that's the things that Sweetfish customers get, certainly. But the point here is not to pitch you on using a podcast or content, but that the request is different. It doesn't sound like I'd like another meeting with you to try harder to sell you on the thing I apparently failed to sell you on the first time. Or I couldn't get a meeting with you, so I'm just going to ask nicer or differently. That's not really what we're talking about here. So a new request is asking them to do something different. I love content because it generates this conversation that is not about selling them a product. It helps you to learn more about their business and learn about them as a person, as an expert in their field. So that's the new request. There's a lot that can be done here, guys. So I'll recap them really quickly. And hopefully you'll get some time to try some of these out. I would love to hear your feedback. But the first one is the new idea. Remember, hey, Susan, you asked me to reach out this month. And since we last spoke, I had an idea. What if instead of the traditional approach, we insert new approach, right? Give them a reason to think about you differently because you're thinking about them differently. Okay, number 2, the new useful content. Tom, we connected in December about your core problem that we solve. I actually found a great content type relating to what we discussed. Here's the link. What would it take to get 15 minutes on your calendar to discuss how this could benefit your team at blank? Or, hey, here's how I think this could help your team at blank. Let's catch up. Okay, number 3, the new request. Abdul, we spoke a while back when I was calling to get time on your calendar to review insert core problem. But I've actually got a favor to ask you. Would you spend 15 minutes on our new podcast talking about the topic you're an expert in? Okay, so those are the 3 core topics, 3 core things, the main things that you can do to follow up more effectively. Because you don't want excuses. And I'm sure we'll talk about this on another episode of Hashtag Prospecting inside of the B2B Growth Show, but you do not want to use the excuse that the leads are weak. These leads just weren't any good. If they were more interested, they would buy from me. This is one thing I talk about on every show I'm on, every webinar we do. It is our job as sales professionals to professionally sell. It's our job to sell to the buyer. It is absolutely not their job to buy from us. Now, you might argue, well, isn't it? Isn't that their job? No, it might be their job to buy something, to find a solution to a problem they're experiencing, but it sure as heck doesn't have to be from you. So it's really, really critical that when we think about follow-up, when we think about the excuse for why we're not following up, you know what? It's probably just a bad lead. If they'd been more interested, they would have followed up with me. That is not how it works. Inbound, outbound referrals, I don't care. These are busy people. You're asking for their time. And as Chris Beal, my friend, the CEO of Connect and Sell, says, you're asking them to trust you more than they trust themselves because they're laying their career on the line. That is unbelievably challenging. I would not lay my career on the line for very many things. And sometimes I'm being asked to when I'm making big purchases, right? We made a big purchase the other day, a big, big, big commitment financially. And we had to trust that the people we were doing business with were so knowledgeable in the thing that we were buying from them, that they had the exact right solution. They were the partners we wanted for the long term. It was incredibly important because in this one misstep, especially at our early stage, that could cost us the company. It's so crucial. So remember that when you're talking about follow-up, when you're thinking about, what should I say? What should I do differently? Use a new idea, share some new useful content, or ask for a new request, something different. Guys, I hope this has been helpful to you. I hope you continue to follow Hashtag Prospecting within the world of B2B Growth Show. And I look forward to sharing with you on another episode. I'll be sure to invite some guests onto the show, chat with those folks who you find most interesting, most entertaining, who know the most about prospecting. Certainly not going to be me all day, every day. I just wanted to introduce myself on this episode and drop some knowledge for you. Please follow me on LinkedIn or connect with me there. I would be more than happy to hear topics you're interested in. And of course, be sure to check out the show, the Secret Sales Podcast I share with Kevin Romani, former head of sales from Close.io. All right, guys, have a great day and happy prospecting.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big 3, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.